Hello, everyone. My name is Slavi Nenov, and I am one of the Varroa development officers here at Tocal. We are three of us, Emily Nordyke, Alex Schellenberg, and myself, and we are here till March, sometime mid-March probably, and then we're going to swarm somewhere, I guess. So please use us as much as you can. We're helping fellow beekeeper with anything around Varroa management, treatment, face-to-face information, technical help, and practical help. Today, I'm going to talk and share with you some aspects about swarming, and swarming particularly in the face of Varroa, and brood break as an additional tool to control those mites. What's happening if we let our hives swarming on regular basis? One thing, this is loss of production. We're losing production, half of our hives going somewhere in the bush. We eventually can lose a hive. Loss in genetics, we're buying all these lovely queens from queen breeders, or we're raising them by ourselves and we're letting them fly. A fellow beekeeper said, what about if we clip the wing? She's not going to go. Yes, but they still will swarm. That will not prevent swarming. We can talk about this one a little bit later. Swarms can be a nuisance to our neighbors as well. And now in this new world we're living in, Australia, they are a source of reinfestation. Once they establish in the bush, no one control the ferals, no one managing those hives, mites building up, and they coming back to hit us, to reinfest our hives, and that will minimize the effect on our treatment and Varroa mite management. So in the end of the day, swarm control also means Varroa control. In springtime, this is a critical time for beekeeping. And what we do in springtime, our spring management, which is a lot to deal with anti-swarming techniques. This is the critical part and period where we can slow down swarming or reduce it. Beekeepers are aware that, in fact, swarming is an heritable trait, but if we leave those hives and colonies on their own device, they're going to swarm anyway. So in other words, we can purchase queens with lower tendency to swarm as a desirable trait. But if we just rely on this trait without acting as beekeepers, then they're going to swarm. What do you think, which instinct is stronger in honeybees? Swarming, reproductive one, or honey production, nectar collection? Anyone to raise their hands who think that swarming and reproduction would be a stronger instinct? Any hands for the opposite one, for honey production? Hey, Dave. What we found through our practice, myself and the beekeepers I've been working with, in case of, let's say, the following scenario: hive start building swarming cells, not kept yet, not sealed yet. This is the time when they're going out, generally when they're swarming. But just before that period, in the nature, a very good honey flow start happening. Let's say gray ironbark just start yielding good amount of nectar. We have observed that bees actually killing the cells, and instead of swarming, they're going to collect the available nectar in the nature, which indicates that millions of years they did learn no honey, no life. Another good example would be in queen breeding space, when queen breeders grafting their cells and placing them in the cell builders, and if at the same period of time we have quite good honey flow or strong honey flow, this is something queen breeders trying to avoid as much as they can. Bees actually building bare combs around the cells and capping off this with honey. And I've been trying to use cells like this into the nukes, cutting them off carefully, and then later on following how those queens performing. Many of them hatching instead of the 16th day, they hatching on 18th or 20th or even longer, which indicates the temperature they've been raised being lower than the optimum one, which is 35, which indicates again that collecting honey is a stronger instinct. So we can in fact use that fact, and at the time when we do spring management, by the time we're splitting our hives, releasing the pressure, we're going to talk a little bit later about it, but making splits, for instance, or demarree, by taking brood with frames with brood and bees and placing foundations, actually we can feed supplementary feeding with sugar syrup and in a way mimicking nectar flow to slow them down. Major causes of swarming, they are internal and external ones. Internal accumulation of young unemployed bees, I'm calling it this way, unemployed because many bees hatching, nothing much happening in the nature. Beekeeper haven't put the boxes on, the honey supers on. They are unemployed. They have no larvae enough to look after. Often they jamming the brood nest with pollen and they start clustering. They have no jobs. Lack of queen bee pheromone, often due to older queens, compromised queens. Lack of space, not bee boxes at the right time. High concentration of carbon dioxide. In fact, research has been done, colonies being gassed up additionally with carbon dioxide, and what's happening, they clustering and they behaving like swarming bees. They either bearding in front of the hive or inside, just lying down like bees ready to swarm. Hereditary factor. External ones, steady trickle of nectar but not major honey flow. This is the tipping point somewhere where we manage our hives, they're building up, but the honey crop is not there yet, so they're not occupied. This is the tipping point where they can start swarming. Combination of outside air temperature and size of the brood nest. Let's say we have 8-frame full depth box with probably 7 frames with brood, and we have quite cool nights and cooler days or rainy days. Many of those bees will be occupied by consuming honey and warming up the brood. But in the other scenario, when it is quite warm nights and hot days, those bees will be unoccupied. They will be hanging out. Those are some of the bees forming the group of swarming bees. And of course, the beekeeper factor, which is us. Consequences of the internal and external factors. There are a couple visual signs within the hive where if we see those signs, we should act as soon as possible. And this is when the sealed brood versus unsealed brood become 2-to-1, and then increased brown brood within the colony. We start seeing those little patches of brown cells amongst the worker cells. This is the time, those are 2 visible indications that we have to act, we have to take the pressure off, either making splits, demarree, or something else. Warmer weather, good pollen, but no major honey flow, but trickle of nectar. Excess royal jelly produced by the nurse bees, the unemployed bees. They are saturated, they are hypopharyngeal and mandibular glands working. They're young bees, they're producing royal jelly, but they cannot use it, not larvae enough to be fed with it. Accumulation of the high level of vitellogenin, and this is the protein. In fact, this is what mites feeding on. So those are fed bees. Research suggesting that in the swarming bees or pre-swarming bees, vitellogenin level, that protein is quite high. No space and poor ventilation in the hive and high levels of carbon dioxide. And that's again, that all leads to the formation of the swarming group in the hive. If we see a picture like this, bees bearding, hanging out, at this time, even we put plenty of boxes, supers, that's way too late. They're going to go. We are behind. This is a good example of what's happening if we're not acting in time. This was one quite lovely big swarm. This is united swarm. Swarms like this do unite together. And in such a big unit, this was at least 10 kilos and approximately 1 kilo of bees. This is about 10,000 bees. So in swarm like this, released from our hives, we do have more than 100,000 bees. 100,000 bees, this is extremely strong hive. Imagine how much honey we're losing by releasing this energy out there instead of controlling it and utilizing that power for our own goals. Anti-swarming measurements, they are most effective before the presence of swarming cells. This is adequate ventilation. Open up your entrances. Use potentially ventilated bottom boards if that suits your style of beekeeping. Always have spare bee equipment. Does not matter how many extra bottom boards, lids, frames we have in the commercial operation, we're always in trouble because canola is on, one of the colleagues is sick, the other one left us, and instead of 4, we are 2, and bees start swarming. We cannot, we're always running out of gear. Harvest the honey in time. Put the bees in work, exercise your bees. What does it mean? It means, again, those anti-swarming techniques. Take frames with brood from that colony, preferably sealed brood, but before hatching, not just sealed, because the sealing period, they are sealed for about 12 days. So basically take a couple or 3 or whatever it needed out of the hive, make a split, a nuke, or boost the weaker colony within the apiary. Of course, make sure you have disease-free operation, not to spread diseases. Place foundation back in those hives and start feeding if it is needed. Keep them employed. Give them jobs to do. Queen bee factor, the age of the queen. We're going to talk about this in the next slide. Some of the anti-swarming techniques such as splitting, rotating of boxes, rotating of frames. We're going to talk about this in the end of the presentation if we have a time. Demarree, it is a popular one. Drifting, separating the group of swarm bees, and some others. Swarming tendency of young versus older queens. Risk of swarming with in 1-year-old queens are approximately 20%. Risk of swarming in 2-year-old queens is around 50%. And the queens from the current season, they are less likely to swarm, often due to a beekeeper's mistakes. But of course, we cannot rely that if we requeen every year on a regular basis, that's enough to prevent swarming. Golden rules in beekeeping are the solid base of success in beekeeping. Regular requeening, regular replacement of the combs in the brood nest particularly. Nutrition management, supplementary feeding when it is needed, if it is needed. I know that in New South Wales this is not very well adopted practice yet, but now particularly with the mites, we may have to think about it more often. In other words, keep tight, divide, reunite, plenty of space provide. What does it mean? Keep tight the colony through the cooler months in winter. When it comes to spring anti-swarming techniques and management, divide the colonies. Take the pressure, release the pressure, give them foundations, feeding them if they need it. Keep them, exercise your bees. Then reunite. We can use some of those nukes or splits back into them in our main hives to boost the hive, and let's say this hive, instead of 40,000 bees, by uniting with a nuke, we may boost it up to 60,000 bees. This is pretty good unit. This is would be much profitable, much stronger hive, and plus we achieve requeening by this. And plenty of space provide means place the boxes, the honey supers, in time. Brood interruption basically means no brood, no area for the mites to reproduce. We know, I think by now, that mites only can reproduce in the brood area. There are basically two brood interruptions. One is the natural one, environmental brood interruption due to a cooler climate, extremely cold or even hot conditions in Australia. The other one, artificial brood break interruption using queen caging or splitting queen cages. There are different options on the market. We're going to discuss this in the end if we have time. When the complete brood break is achieved, all the mites are on the adult bees, and then whatever option we use to treat the hive with, either synthetic or non-synthetic, we're targeting all the mites are exposed immediately to the product we're applying within the hive. Splitting and requeening, broodless period. There are a few methods we can use. Walk-away split, which the brood break is approximately in between 25 and 30 days. The successful rate of the queen coming back would be about 70-80%. Requeening with a queen cell, the brood break we can achieve is about 10-15 days. Success rate 70-80% again. The other one, requeening with a virgin queen. This is, as a success rate, the lowest, around 10-20%, achieving 5 to 10 days broodless period. And requeening with mated queen, 1 to 3 days brood break and up to 100% success.